A Swift Kick in the Ass, episode 45.
All big changes start with a swift kick in the ass. Join the journey of lifelong friends, John Curren and Tom Stewart, as they make conventional thought bend over and take a boot to the keister. Warning, listeners may notice a force equal to or greater than needed to get your ass moving. A swift kick in the ass, living life on your terms.
Welcome, I'm Tom Stewart, and I'm joined with my lifelong childhood friend, John Curren, and today we talk about something very important. The title of this episode is Stop. This information on street smarts could change your life. Welcome aboard, John.
Thanks, Tom. You know, I think this can change your life. Street smarts is really about being aware of your situation, being aware of your environment, what's in your environment, who's in your environment, and it's about trusting your own judgment, not only about people, but also about things that matter. So this isn't really about, staying alive out there on the mean streets of, Hollywood, Florida, where you live and where I grew up, or in Richmond, Virginia. It's not about that. It's about taking your experiences and learning from them. And in the sense of a pure definition of wisdom, wisdom means applied knowledge. And this is wisdom based on your own experience and becoming a better person because of it, because of your experiences.
Absolutely. And, I put together a couple of words that when I think of street smarts, some of the first things that come to my mind are situational awareness, obviously, being skeptical, being defensive, having a good posture, right? And that could be not talking about just how you walk, but how you handle yourself in front of others. Being able to improvise and be able to think out of the box, being observant, be aware of where you are, and do not follow the herd. You're not scared to break rules.
Yeah, you hit upon a good point there, and that is, book learning, which is compared to street smarts, or things that you learned on the street compared to what you learned in a book. People who learn through a book, and I've done plenty of book learning. I think there's balance that you have to have, but book learning, a lot of it relies on people who follow the rules and are looking for a single answer to a question that they have. And let's just face it, out there on the streets, there are multiple answers. There are multiple, it's not just multiple choice. It's fill in the blank, and you have to know how to do that in order to survive these days. It's not only about being street smart, but it's also about recognizing when you're being street stupid. And I'll just share with you an experience that I had when I was street stupid. I was up in Chicago on a healthcare executives conference, staying in the south side of Chicago in this little hotel. And my buddy and I went pub jumping on the south side of Chicago, and we are out till 2 or 3 in the morning. We're walking the streets of Southside Chicago, intoxicated, and that was a scary night. And you can't. One of the things I would advise against is being drunk on the streets of Chicago on the south side 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. We were scared for our lives at certain times. We ran. I mean, there was it was a definite time when I was street stupid, but just glad to survive that. And I've learned, but don't do that.
One of the things about being street smart is you're not born with it. You learn it over time, and examples like that are times to get experience. And I've had the same thing when I was younger, probably about 20 years old. I had this guy pull up next to me, and he had long hair, and he was driving a van, and he's like, "Hey, man," because I had long hair at the time, so of course I was a target for what with the scam he was about to run on me. And what it was is he said, "Hey, I'm going to the Dollhouse, which was a famous stripper joint down in Fort Lauderdale. And he goes, and they ordered, six speakers of, these they were called acoustic monitors. There's gigantic speakers that were water cooled or liquid cooled, and they're worth probably about $400 a piece. He goes, they messed up, and instead of giving me 6 speakers or whatever, they give me 6 pair. So I have extra ones, and I have to go over and deliver these, and I just want to get rid of some real quick. Would you buy them for $200? And, of course, and when he pulled up to me, I was at the ATM. So what did I do? Being a young, naive kid, I looked at them because they looked cool. I was like, these things look awesome. They were brand new in the box. And I was like, yeah, all right. And, I pulled out $200. I gave it to them. I took the speakers, brought them home. I plugged them in. They're like, yeah, it sounded all right. Later on, that night, I'm watching the news, and I see a special running going, sneakers, speakers, and other scams to be aware of. And there's my speakers, and the guy's talking about if they were real acoustic monitor speakers, it would be hard to pick up because the liquid coolant in it would be so heavy. But he says I can pick these up with 2 fingers, So that was one of the times. So next time that happened to me, a couple of years later, I was walking with my friend Benito. We were getting ready to go into a mall, and another guy, it was a different guy, but pulled up with the same scam. And as soon as he opened his mouth, I started cursing him out, wanted to fight, and Benito was just like, dude, chill out. What are you doing? The guy's just trying to sell you some speakers. But, I had lived and learned.
Yeah, that reminds me of a time when my dad wanted to get my mom a really nice Christmas present. And, this is back in the days before Craigslist or eBay. I mean, this was before the internet at all. And he wanted to get her a nice set of diamond earrings. And he didn't want to go to the jewelry store because my dad was not a jewelry store kind of guy. So he found an ad in the paper about these really nice, I think they were 1/2 carat diamond earrings. And of course, my dad was a pretty street smart guy. He was pretty savvy, and he thought it was a good price. He decided to meet the guy at a jewelry store, and my dad knew the jeweler, and he trusted his word, and got them checked out. And the jeweler looked at him. He says, John, this is a really good deal. You need to go for it. So my dad bought them and put them bought like a Cosmopolitan magazine, with the model on the front, and kind of put the earrings in where the model's earrings were, and wrapped it up and gave it to my mom for Christmas. And she was just overjoyed. But of course, my mom's pretty smart too. And she decided, well, I need to get these insured. So let me take them to the jeweler and get them checked out. And those weren't diamond earrings at all. They were cubic zirconias. and the guy did a bait and switch. The jeweler checked out. I'm sure the jeweler wasn't lying. He really checked them out, and they were real at the time. But just in the blink of an eye, boom, they were switched. And my mom got cubic zirconias, and never let my dad live that down, that he was so foolish to think he was buying the real thing when he wasn't. So, plan accordingly, I think, and take calculated risks, but most importantly, learn from your mistakes. And, it's kind of like, if you're going to take a long trip and you don't know the road, you want to make sure there's enough gas in the tank to get through. I know that's kind of sounds like I'm making a bridge right now. I'm driving down the bridge. You don't want to run out of gas and you want to make sure that you have enough gas to get where you need to go. So don't go, if you're driving in unfamiliar territory, do whatever you can to make sure that you're going to get there safely. And my dad thought he was doing that by going to the jeweler. But like I said, he let his guard down. We all did. I was just a kid back then. And in just the blink of an eye, that con man, swindled him,
This reminds me of something that happened this week to one of my good friends who owns a business here locally, and he's a very street smart guy. I mean, this guy's been around, but even street smart people can be taken. And what happened to him is Florida Power and Light supposedly called him and said, hey, your payment is past due, and if you don't pay us today, we're going to shut the power off to your business. And he's thinking, I can't close my business. I have a bunch of clients coming in, and I need to make sure. He goes, I'm for sure that I paid it. Let me just get to my computer. And the guy said, well, you got to make sure that you pay today. So this guy wasn't anywhere near his computer. So the guy on the other end of the phone had all this information about him. Plus, he had just my friend had just picked up a new service from Florida Power and Light, probably to regulate like the air conditioners, like like cost savings, like they can shut them on and off remotely. And this person knew that. So they probably had some insider information from the company, maybe someone that installed this, but they knew all about his business address, his billing, all information that no one other than FP&L should have had. But his mistake, and it was an 800 number, the mistake is he didn't hang up and call back FPL and try to, make sure. He went ahead and talked to the guy. And then what really got fishy is the guy said, listen, in order to clear this up, you got to send $500 through Western Union to us today to this specific account. So my friend went down to Western Union, was writing out the check, and the lady at Western Union says, hold on, this doesn't sound legit. And, my friend was like, you know what? Maybe you're right. So he called Florida Power and Light and found out, no, this was not legit. And this guy was a scammer. And he almost sent over $500 to him. And God knows he might have opened up his account or whatever else. He could have been taken for everything he had. So you got to be careful. Even if you're street smart, there's always people out there trying to take advantage of you.
Yeah, just I'd say within the last month, I had an attempt. There was an attempt made to phish information from me. PHISH, not the sea creature.
Right.
But I got an email from Just Host, who is hosts my website, and it said I had too many folders available or something like that, and to resolve this issue, just click on this link and clean up your file folders. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I don't really have a lot of stuff out there. And it seemed fishy to me. So I hovered over the link, and I saw that it wasn't going to Just Host. It was going somewhere else, just entirely different. So I went on the website, I went to Just Host, went to that website that I knew was legitimate, looked up the customer service number, called them and asked them, and they said, no, there's nothing wrong with your account. That was a fish. But it's so easy to get kind of caught up in the emotion of it all and make bad decisions because, and that's what con men and especially on the internet, that's what they try to do. They try to make you feel like, oh my gosh, you need to take action right here and right now. And I would have gotten burned. I would have gotten burned that way.
Well, get this. Just a few minutes ago, I had a phone call as we're sitting here, and it's this automated number that calls me every day. And the first 3 digits are always the same as my phone, right? So whenever I see it, now I recognize it. But for about the past year, every couple days or so, I get this automated, call it's in Spanish, right? And it's always like, trying to sell me tickets to Universal or something, right? So, I always ignore it and hang up on it. But, a couple of times I got mad. So I says, you know what, I'm going to call this number and figure out and tell them to take me off the list. So I would go to a different phone. I wouldn't call from my phone. I would call from one at work or something that, I have a bunch of extensions at work. And every time I called, it was a different person. I had an old lady, that was like 85 years old telling me, I don't know, this is my cell phone, and a kid. And it turns out that they're spoofing the number. So what they do is it's an IP-based phone, and they're spoofing other people that are Verizon customers with a number similar to mine. So the number that's actually shown on my caller ID is not the number it's calling from. So I finally called Verizon and said, hey, what can I do about this? You know what? They said absolutely nothing. And I made the mistake the last time is I pressed 1, because I was like, I don't know what it's saying, but I'll take a guess that you press 1, you talk to the operator. Sure enough, a guy answers in Spanish. And as soon as I started, in on him, he hung up on me right away. But from what after researching a little bit, what they can do is if you press 1, they know people will do that. and it will cram international phone charges on your bill. So I made sure to call Verizon. They made sure if there's any suspicious calls, they'll take that off. But it's something that can happen to anyone. And I still get these calls. There's no way for me to block them.
Yeah. Back when I was trying to sell my house, I had just moved to a new house and, had not sold the other. And I was in a predicament. I didn't know exactly what to do. I couldn't sell the house. The market was really down. So I decided to rent it out. So of course I make up an ad on Craigslist. I put it out there, and my realtor called me up and she said, "John, why are you trying to rent your house so cheaply?" It's like, I don't think it's that cheap. I'm just trying to cover my mortgage. And this went on. She, for, like a week, I said, I answered her question or whatever. It seemed to satisfy her. 2 weeks goes down the road and she brings it up again. I'm like, yeah, I still haven't rented the house. But what are you talking about? I'm not renting it for, $600 or $700 or something like that. I think I had it for $1,400 or $1,500 a month. And it turned out that someone had basically taken my ad. I had my email address in there, and instead of saying JW Curren, they spelled it a little bit differently, or it was very close. And they created another account based on my name. And they were, what they were trying to do is they were trying to get people to meet them at the house and give them a deposit check, without even going inside of the house, or even just talking to the people over the phone, trying to con them out of that money. And that's really concerning when they know your name and they have your email address and they're trying to pass themselves off as you. So I went ahead and I contacted, Craigslist. I took the ad off. I contacted my email provider, and they said, okay, you need to send in a copy of your driver's license and this and that. And I called up the Secret Service, because the Secret Service is actually in charge of those type of matters like internet crime. So I called up the Secret Service, and they said, "You're just lucky that you didn't lose any money, because there's no way for us to track this down."
It's scary because, I had to file similar complaint too, as you're talking about with the federal government, because, Verizon couldn't help me. They couldn't, and it's not any fault of their own. They have no control over someone spoofing lines. And I had the same thing happen a couple months ago where there was someone from Jamaica that kept on calling my mother, and me and my mom shared a line. We had a different ring, so if she had a different ring, I would pick it up. But she kept on telling me that some guy's calling her, but she couldn't understand what he was saying, right? So I go, all right, let me talk to him. And once he got on there, he wasn't even saying her name right. He's like, "Miss Valerie, I want to speak to Miss Valerie." And I was like, "What's this about?" And, he tried to go, "No, I need to talk to her." I go, "No, you don't." I said, "You don't need to talk to her at all. She's not interested," And the guy was very rude, and he kept on calling back repeatedly. So I started getting rude to the point where all of a sudden he's calling me at 10 o'clock at night, and then he starts cussing at me. And I called the phone company, same thing, nothing we can do, and this time it was AT&T, and they said, they're out of the country. We can't stop them, and they called, same thing. They called from different phone numbers. So what I finally did is I hooked up my mixer that we use here for podcasting, and I recorded some police squelching sounds and stuff. And next time he called, I started talking to him, and then I started playing these things. I said, "Yes, sir, he's on the line." And it sounded like they were tracing his number. He never called back again.
You sure, you've talked in the past about your mom, liking Metallica and talking about the legalization of marijuana in Florida. Are you sure it really wasn't for her? She has a Jamaican connection, maybe.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was, That's why he only wanted to talk to her.
In Florida, I think this happens quite often, especially with the senior population, because, if the older you are, the less likely you are to have real experience with computers. And, I know that I've been, people have tried to fish for information before. I mean, I've received letters, like emails from the FBI and stuff like that. And it looks so legitimate. Even that example that I told you before, the story about how it was fished recently, it said the email said that it came from Just Host, which is my my hosting company.
Right.
But it was not from them. But they were spoofing it,
Mm-hmm.
and they're getting much more sophisticated about it. And if you are not street smart, if you just if it seems fishy to you, it probably is fishy.
And the best thing to do is always call the company directly. So, if someone calls you like that and ask for information or money, tell them no. And say, listen, I want to call the company, and don't ask for them the number. And also make sure that you disconnect and hang up completely, because one of the scams that they're running on the elderly is they'll say this is the police department, and they'll try to get information out of them, and they'll say, listen, if you don't believe us, if they're having a hard time, you can hang up and call right back at this number, or call 911. But they know that if the person doesn't hang up long enough and pick it back up, the other person can remain on the phone. And what happens is some of these old people, hang up real quick and dial 911 or whatever like that, and the same person answers, or they put their buddy on the phone and say, yes, Officer so-and-so's here, and it looks legit then.
Yeah, and I know my mom was contacted by the IRS, quote unquote IRS, on the phone. The IRS does not call; they send letters. It's official,
right?
And it's just rampant. It's just amazing to me how sophisticated scammers have gotten. And if you really think about it, if you can send out an email to 10,000 people and one of them bites, for $10,000 or something like that, it only takes one person to make them very rich, and it's basically untraceable. So, know your environment,
Make sure when you are in that environment that you're not flashing around money, you're not flashing around valuables. One of the things, another scam that they do down here in South Florida, because South Florida has all the scams, people. They have every single one. And there's always a new one coming from some other country, because it's like a melting pot down here. And one of the new ones, or not a new one, they've been doing it for a couple of years, but during Christmas time, the holiday season's coming up. And what they like to do is they like to follow people coming out of electronic stores like Best Buy, and they see that they're, sometimes they'll follow them all the way out of the store if they saw they purchased a large, item or high ticket item. And a lot of times those people will stick it in their trunk or in their car, and then they go across the street to the mall and they finish their Christmas shopping. Well, they come back and their car is busted open and their stuff is gone. And another one that's very similar to that, and it happened to my truck. My wife one time went to a Jiu Jitsu class at night, and she had a bunch of envelopes or something from work sitting in a box on the passenger side, and someone saw that, broke the window in order to get this worthless box, but they thought something of value was in it, and it happened so quickly. And so one thing is if you have a car or a vehicle, don't leave things or bags or laptops or anything that looks valuable, even if it's not, sitting on the seat. Kind of put it away so it's not in view, because it is a target.
Tom, I was when we were talking about this topic before we recorded this episode, I was thinking about our street smarts growing up in Hollywood, Florida. If for those of you who are not familiar with Hollywood, Florida, it sits in between Miami and Fort Lauderdale. And when Tommy and I were growing up, it was just this small city. I mean, a really small city. And Tommy and I used to go to the mall a lot.
Does that make it the ass crack of South Florida?
I don't know. I kind of miss it.
Just because it's sitting in between. I'm only kidding. It's really a cool place. It's very unique.
But, when we were growing up, it was really small. In fact, my sister had a horse at a farm that was, it seemed like, you keep on going until you think you've gone too far, and then you go a little bit more and you get there. There was farmland, but all that's been developed, since. But as kids, Tommy and I knew our environment. We knew how to get to the mall as quickly as possible. And that involved cutting in between houses, running through certain yards. We knew all the openings. We knew where the fences were. We knew who had dogs. We knew the little old ladies who were going to yell at us if we yelled through their yard. But I'd like to actually go back and see how many miles we saved ourselves. But instead of doing the long way, walking the long way and taking the sidewalk up to the mall, I mean, we cut it probably in half, the distance. And we would run. We'd get to the mall in, 10 minutes.
Right, because the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line.
But, I was thinking, street smarts, growing up on the mean streets of Hollywood, Florida, it seems kind of silly, but it does relate because we used our experience and we learned from that, and we applied that knowledge in order to really, get us farther to where we wanted to be. And as kids, especially as teenagers, we want to be at the mall where the girls were, and they had great hot pretzels.
Well, let me say something though. Even though it seems more like an innocent time, it really wasn't so innocent, because if you remember when we were about 12 years old, some asshole caught Adam Walsh, which was John Walsh's son, from America's Most Wanted, abducted him. He lived in our neighborhood. The boy was probably about 8 years old, sexually abused him and assaulted him, and then decapitated him. And that was the whole turning point. That's why John Walsh became who he is right now. I always refer to him like the modern day Batman, because he really did. When you see him on America's Most Wanted, he's not there to be an actor. He's not there just to be a host. He actually cares. He's changed a lot of laws and before he got that job for Fox, when he was on that TV show, he went to Washington D.C. with his wife and protested and got a lot of laws changed. And he's the one responsible for why you see kids used to see kids on the back of milk cartons.
Yeah, I think, there was a sense of innocence back then, but I think it was more naivety.
Yeah.
I know for a fact, my mom would take me to the Sears mall, just the mall we're talking about, had the big Sears store, and they had a big toy section. And she just let me run loose in there. And the mean streets of Hollywood were found right there in that toy section, because there were a lot of hidden aisles, I guess, where all the toys were, where you were out of sight. They didn't really have a lot of security cameras back then. And all the mean kids would be hidden in, back in this toy section. And it got pretty rough.
It did. I suffered a really bad bruise on my sternum. I remember this kid that was like twice my size. I didn't know him. He grabbed this toy gun out of my hand, and back then toys had, real metal on them and with a wooden stock, and he hit me with this. He thought it would be fun to butt me with the end of the rifle into the chest. Yeah, I know. But, this is the kind of stuff. This is probably why I do martial arts now. Because back then, man, I was just getting my ass kicked all the time because there was such mean kids and mean people. And that toy section that you're talking about is where Adam Walsh was taken. I used to go there every day and play Atari at that same place. I wasn't there that day. That one day I wasn't there. The next day, all of a sudden, and everyone's looking for him, and then before you know it, it was a couple of months before they actually found out what happened to him. And even then, they really didn't know if the guy that had admitted it, that they had caught and admitted to doing it was really him. It was a serial killer that, had killed 50 something people across the country. This guy was bad news, but they weren't sure if it was really him, and there was even speculation at one time that Jeffrey Dahmer had something to do with it, because Jeffrey Dahmer, the cannibal guy that used to eat little kids, lived in our area too. So it was just a fun-filled, place to grow up.
So really, it seems so innocent saying, "Oh, we're from Hollywood, Florida, this tiny little city in South Florida," but it was pretty serious. There was some really serious stuff.
It being because it's a transient area, and these are little things that you learn. I drove a taxi cab for several years as I was going through college, and that, I think, amped up my street smarts greatly, because, I'd have people smoking crack in the back of my car. I'd have people doing drugs, having sex in the back of my car. All kinds of crazy things that people do in South Florida. And I guess cabs is one of the things. But did you want to touch on some more other tips that we could give people? on how to
Yeah,
help.
sure. You can't live. I mean, life is full of risks, and you have to take them, or you're never going to grow. But you can take calculated risks. Back when I was in college and going to the University of Florida, the Gainesville murders happened, and I was in the last semester of school, and I had worked really hard to get this residency so I could graduate. And it was the only paid residency for my entire class. So, I was really proud of that $5 an hour that I earned, because it was $5 an hour more than any other student that was graduating was getting. But here's the serial killer who's murdering people in this town. And I worked at the hospital, and there were a lot of stories going on because, the nurses were married to policemen or firemen, and you just, heard all these crazy stories. And I remember my mom telling me, Johnny, I want you to come home. And a lot of students got called home, and they left. They were excused from leaving the university because of this situation. There was a murderer loose. And I told my mom no. And the reason I told her no is because I really feel that if you run from fear, you'll always be running. You'll live in a constant state of fear. And I just refused to do that. Now, being street smart, that means not isolating yourself. There's safety in numbers. And, during that time, a lot of people a lot of friends, they just, gather together for, big sleepovers kind of, because there was safety in numbers. I had a dog, I had like a billy club, and, there was all sorts of ways you could protect yourself. When you walk out to a car, make sure you're aware of what's going on around you. Keep your eyes open. Don't put yourself in a bad situation. Don't walk down that dark alley in the middle of the night. Don't walk, at 3 a.m. when you're drunk in Chicago, South Side. You're going to get mugged. You're going to get hurt. And
if you are walking in those kind of places, if you're walking in a neighborhood that you aren't familiar with, try to act at least like you do or are familiar with it. Because if you're confused, that makes you a target, and that's one of the things. Yeah. Miami was famous for when people would come in from out of town. They used to have the rental cars would have a Z on the license plate. So it's Z followed by 4 or 5 digits, whatever it was on the license plate. And what they would do is the bad guys would wait until they come out of the airport, see the rental car, bump into them at a red light, and people get out to check to see what the damage is, and then they carjack them. And, there's been murders. I mean, it was really bad to the point where the state of Florida had to change that rule and basically camouflage the rental cars. They didn't want to draw attention to them.
Yeah, and, take your headphones off, take those earbuds out of your ear, put your cell phone away, your smartphone. If you look around these days, people have their smartphones and they're not paying attention to what they're doing. They're looking at the smartphone as they're walking. It doesn't matter where they are or what they're doing. If you're in a bad neighborhood or in a situation that you're not familiar with, take the earphones out so you can hear what's going on around you, and pay attention to your surroundings.
And if someone does come up to you and try to engage, in conversation with you, be polite, but be brief. Don't sit there and have a conversation, man, because the people that are wanting to take advantage of you are trying to get you to drop your guard. And that's a great way. They'll seem friendly and, hey, how you doing? Is there anything I could help you with? Or, trust me, those are the people you want to stay away from.
Yeah, and that I just have to admit, that's one of the most difficult things for me to do, because I'm very friendly. I'm very talkative. My daughter just made comment to me just recently she says, Daddy, you always meet new people. And I'm always talking to people. I'm a friendly guy. But I'm also, in the grocery store, meeting new people, that's one thing. But out there on the streets or in an unknown situation, that does change. I agree, be polite, but be brief. Don't invite further conversation. And, we're not saying don't be friendly, but don't put your trust in people that you don't know.
Right. I mean, if you're walking down a neighborhood like that and you see someone approaching you or a group of people, cross the street to the other side. Always make sure that you keep an eye out for other pedestrians, maybe that you could call out for help if something did happen. Also, look around and for improvised weapons. I know it's crazy, but look, and if someone's gonna attack you, is there something? Is there a garbage can lid, or is there a stick that you can pick up and help defend yourself?
Yeah, and when I've been in New York City, or some crowded city where you're going to be in crowds, it is generally safer to be in a crowd. You shouldn't isolate yourself, but also within that crowd could be pickpockets. So, if you have a wallet, take it out of your back pocket, put it in your front pocket. It's much more difficult to get lifted. If you have a purse, hold that person tight. I don't have a purse, but that's what I understand. Hold it in tight and protect it. Don't.
Well, be aware. I see so many people at the grocery store. They're going to bag their groceries, and there's their purse sitting inside the shopping cart. That happened to my mother. She was, they're putting away groceries, and some guy pushed a shopping cart, and he basically blocked her where she couldn't get to him, and cut her off with another shopping cart, grabbed the purse and ran across the street and took off. And then they found the purse and it was all empty.
I know that we try not to use explicit language on this show, but my grandmother grew up in Chicago, and she was downtown, in Chicago, where it was a rough place. And there was a purse snatcher in the neighborhood that had, a reputation of snatching these ladies' purses. So my grandmother was walking home from work one night, and she had her purse stolen. But the surprise was for the purse snatcher, because she was expecting them. And she had it was an empty purse. It was an old purse that she no longer used. And there was a note in it that said, "F you."
She should have had a bunch of rocks in there too. So at least it would have made it a little harder to carry.
But,
that's funny, because when you remember when we were a kid, in middle school was probably our toughest years, because you're going through that awkward stage. And I think that where we went to middle school was like going to prison. It literally was. I mean, there was riots, race riots. It was just bad. You would get jumped all the time. I would be at the urinal, and the kids would come up and check your pockets to see if you had any money while you're taking a pee, right? So after a while, you start to get smart, because you grow up in that environment. And, if you had candy, they would take it from you. So one time I got a bag of Red Hots, but I made sure I got the trick Red Hots. I went to the magic store and bought these ones that have Tabasco sauce on them. And I had some real Red Hots in my hand, so I was eating them. So sure enough, about 5 kids ran up, and, they all stuck their hand in the bag, and, they didn't ask. They take it from you. They're bullies. And they take the things, and they stick it in their mouth, and a few feet they'd run. All of a sudden they're all spitting and puking, and it was good stuff, man.
I remember the stink bombs.
Yeah.
And I remember you doing that in the school cafeteria.
Well, I got suspended from high school for doing stink bombs. I was called Stink Bomb Tom. I used to have that Chinese guy, Tom Moy, that I hung out with, and we would crack them everywhere, even to the point where we were one of our favorite targets was glass elevators, because you could see the reaction of the people. But we went to a local mall called the Aventura Mall around here, and Ann Bishop, which was a famous news anchor at the time, was doing a report. So we'd go up on the second level, and I dropped them down because they're little glass vials. They shatter real easy. So I dropped them down to the first floor on the tile right behind her as she's doing her newscast. And you see her nose wrinkling up, and we're like, yeah, live TV. But,
Tommy, I didn't tell you this, and I meant to bring that the last time I was in South Florida. I'll bring it the next time I drive down. I couldn't take it on the plane, but I found stink bombs. I found them. They're sitting in the door of my car, waiting for the most, opportune time.
Okay, wait. Listen, one more thing about stink bomb. There was a jar of it that you could remove the lid and just sprinkle out a little bit, and it was called Morning Breeze perfume, right? And I used to work at the health food store when I was in high school. And there was this lady, we used to sell essence oils. We had like little sampler and stuff, but then the essence oils were kind of pricey. If anyone knows anything about that business, they're very pricey now. But what I did is it looked just like one of those bottles, but I could tell that she was looking to lift something. She was like trying to scope out the store. So I went and put my little bottle over there and put it by the essence oils. So sure enough, she stole it because it wasn't tied down. It wasn't in a box. She just thought she could take it. It was around the holidays. So she probably either got home and sprinkled some of that on herself or gave it away as a Christmas present. And it was a sweet revenge.
So I think we're getting here. We're getting close to probably wrapping up. But I spent some time in Atlanta. And Atlanta, there's public transportation. There's a railway system called MARTA, and they have the same. They have subways in New York, and anywhere you go on public transportation, like Tri-Rail down in Miami. You're out there in the public, and you're around people. So one of the things that they say that you should not do is really make eye contact. You don't want to draw attention to yourself. You want to keep doing whatever you're doing. Just basically, if you want to be street smart, just go about your business. Don't make a spectacle of yourself. Don't go staring at other people. And let's just face it, there are a lot of weird looking people out there in the world. I'm probably one of them.
Try to blend in. Try to blend in. Don't stand out, and also be confident. Confidence has a lot to do with, whether you're marked as a victim or not. And a great way to learn confidence is by training martial arts or learning how to defend yourself. I wanted to talk a little bit about this because, I have some experience with this. And if you are ever looking for self-defense, the first thing is, if you really want true self-defense, buy a gun, because you can learn how to use a handgun and get a concealed carrier permit depending on where you live. But the thing is, you can learn that a lot quicker than you can any martial art. But you got to stay away from schools that, anything that's woo-woo, that's, fake. You want something that has live training or contact. That's why boxers are so efficient, wrestlers. And if you're looking for a martial art, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, every time they teach you one or two moves a class, and then you do what you basically roll, and is what they call it. It's wrestling. And you try to perform that move on someone that's resisting, and it's not easy. It's, it may look like easy and you can learn all these moves, but very simple. It's very direct, and you actually learn practical experience. Another good one is, in the street, you obviously don't always want to go down, but you should know a grappling art, and you should know some form of standing up fighting. So MMA is very good because it mixes jiu-jitsu and wrestling with boxing and kickboxing. So that's a great thing to learn for self-defense. It's more of a sport, and there are some aspects that, that you wouldn't use in the street, but it's a great foundation. If you're a good athlete and you can do MMA, it's going to be hard for someone to mess you up on the street. You're going to have an advantage. Krav Maga is another one. That's that they teach to the Israeli military, and that's basically a mixture of jiu-jitsu, striking, grappling, and weapons. They teach, disarms, which that's not going to, that's not very practical. But, usually in that case, give them what they want.
Is that what Don't Mess with the Zohan? At the Adam Sandler movie?
Oh, probably. All I remember from that is being very, very, very embarrassed because I took at the time, my 13-year-old daughter to see that. We were at Atlantis in the Bahamas, and they had a theater, and that was the only movie that was playing. I didn't know what it was. And, here's this guy catching, fish with his ass cheeks and, getting sexual with all these women.
People with his feet.
Yeah. So I was like, this is awkward.
With the most recent Walking Dead episode with Morgan, and I forget the other character's name, but he learned Aikido.
Yeah.
And, and that too, I think would be a good martial arts if you're not interested in, hurting anyone and really interested more in self-defense. I had thought about that myself. Now, the note about having a gun is that if you have a gun, as Tom said, you need to be trained. You need to be prepared, and most of all, be prepared to use that gun and not be afraid to pull that trigger if you need to. Of course, you don't want to, but you have to prepare yourself to do that. Because if you have a gun and you're afraid to use it, you're actually putting yourself more at risk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they'll disarm you, and then they're the ones who are going to have the gun, and they're not going to have that same fear.
Absolutely. It's you definitely need training, and like one of the guys that I used to train with, he was an ex SWAT officer, and he does combat training with weapons, I mean with guns, and it's all about clearing houses, how to shoot from a car. I mean, he does the whole gamut because there's a lot to think about when you're in stressful situations. He teaches teachers how to how to hide and prepare if their school's ever attacked by a gunman. It's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, so anyhow, I think we'll wrap this up, and just remember, street smarts is taking your experiences and learning from them, applying your knowledge based on your experience. So be street smart, not street stupid, and think about everything that we've talked about here, because we think it will not only have the potential to save your life and keep you out of bad situations, but really you need to be street smart in order to grow personally. Personal growth involves taking risk. And if you don't get yourself out there, if you don't allow yourself the opportunity to grow, you're not going to. So I'll end with saying, the joy is in the journey. Strength is made in the struggle that you have during that journey. And then personal growth really is an outcome of overcoming barriers.
Sounds good, man. And always wear sneakers so you can run.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to run.
Thanks for listening. Check out our website at swiftkickinass.com and sign up for our free goodies, right?
Yep. Till next time.
Bye. Peace.